Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ninth episode of Adapt Revolution. This evening, we have our guest Amanda Ray with us, and Amanda is coming to us from West Virginia and is a lawyer in West Virginia. And Beth and Amanda met at the National Now conference recently. So I will let Amanda go ahead and introduce herself, and then we'll get into some questions for the evening.
Hello, my name is Amanda Ray, as you said. I've been an attorney licensed to practice in West Virginia since 2006, and I'm also licensed to practice in Maryland since 2010. I've lived in both states. I think both states are beautiful. I practice mostly family law, abuse and neglect, juvenile cases. That would be things like truancy, juvenile delinquency. That would be like juvenile criminal stuff. And then I also do some basic landlord, tenant, and contract cases, a little bit of, I believe I said criminal work, wills, and then some other stuff that just comes through the door. My practice covers different aspects of family law, criminal stuff, does take into account various areas of disability law as well, from dealing with some aspects of Social Security, clients who have disabilities, competency to stand trial, juvenile issues, dealing with juveniles who may or may not be competent, dealing with adults who may or may not be competent. So it comes up, and I think that's part of why I'm here. I'm also a member of the National Organization for Women and my local chapter of the Morgantown Now and West Virginia Now, and that's why I was at the conference that I met Beth at. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Beth, do you have any questions for Amanda starting out that you'd like to ask to start off?
Yeah, one question I do have is if there are any organizations that you work with outside of your law practice that are disability rights organizations that are run by and for people with disabilities that have allies in addition, currently, especially ones that are run, that, are working on having pride-oriented things like marches and theater and stuff like that.
Well, our local chapter of Now has worked with Morgantown Pride, and there is we actually did. There was supposed to be a Pride march in June. We had the permit and everything to do that, but the local police said that they didn't have enough police on staff and that they couldn't ensure safety. So we ended up having to cancel it, but we did a walk anyway. We just couldn't have the streets closed. And then we still did the walk and we still did the meetup at 123 Pleasant Street, which actually is a really nice place. It's a bar here in town, but it's owned by a really cooperative owner, and he lets do fundraisers. A lot of progressive groups use it here in town. It's also a music venue, but he will let you use the space often for free to hold events and things to raise money for different groups and different organizations. For example, Now used it and did a period products drive to donate to the local schools back in February. And then obviously Morgantown Pride was was doing it as part of the march, but it turned into a walk. Then they met there afterwards and did an event there. And then they had a block party as well the next day. That was very successful. And they invited all kinds of different organizations to take part in that. And I actually was in a couple of groups that were part of that. And we also have a group called the Community Coalition for Social Justice. They do some work with disabilities, but also do various other organizations and work. I've worked with the League of Women Voters on voting rights and voting access for everybody. Also, the local NAACP chapter is very active here. I can't name a specific group locally that's working just on disability rights groups. I do have a friend who, the one I mentioned to you, who's a behavioral health advocate with legal aid, and she had mentioned a group that she and another friend are working on trying to get, they've kind of started it, and I agreed to be on the board for that, although we haven't had a meeting that I've attended yet. It's new that I'm just starting up with. They've already had some meetings. I'm new to the group, but I haven't been to a board meeting yet. But it's supposed to be working with some disability people, and then also I think substance abuse is another aspect that they're working on. So I'm kind of excited about that group, but that's totally new. Like I said, I've not been to my first meeting yet. They had one scheduled and then it got canceled. So I was kind of disappointed that I didn't actually get to go yet, but that's kind of neat. And then, I'm on the board of West Virginia Women Work, but that's kind of different. Although I don't think that crosses into disability much, although it could. They've been excited to work with almost anyone. Any woman that wants to learn how to work in the trades. So I try to be collaborative personally, and I've been a part of different groups, and I know a lot of people in different groups in town. So it comes from being here for the last 12 years, and then the law school is in Morgantown. So when I was here when I went to college and when I went to law school, so I know quite a few people in Morgantown. I know a lot of the groups that are doing different projects and things. So if we want to get people together to do something, it's not that hard to work on a particular issue. I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but
well, they could be, a disability rights group that, is intersectional.
I think
is what I'm thinking of as well.
Working with people with disabilities, Amanda was saying that her work really does come into people with disabilities, and I'm wondering, Amanda, from your perspective, what are maybe a couple of the most important things that you have to keep in mind when you are being an ally to people that you're working with that are that's part of their case, or whatever you're working on, it does touch disability? What are some of the things that you try to do or keep in mind, when you're working with people with disabilities?
I generally like to talk to the client to see what they're comfortable with in terms of what they want to share with me and what they're comfortable with me sharing with someone else. Some people have a disability that is very noticeable that obviously if you're in a wheelchair, everybody knows automatically that you're in a wheelchair. You can't hide something like that. Some people may have a behavioral or mental health condition that you don't know about, or a disability that's not something people would necessarily know, and they may or may not want me to reveal that information. It helps them in a case, and it might not help them in a case. And so what I try to talk to clients about is they need to be comfortable with me as their attorney to share information with so that we can plan and have a strategy for how to deal with things, but also to talk about, if somebody's going to make an allegation against them, how do we deal with that? Because sometimes people will allege things about you and then we have to deal with it in court. And sometimes people will try to use things against you that they shouldn't try to use against you. They'll allege that you're a bad parent or that you can't parent because you're depressed or you have depression or schizophrenic or that you have some other disability that means that you can't take care of your kids properly. And that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Sometimes when you're going through a divorce or you're going through a certain case, that might be used against you, or someone else might try to use it against you. So it comes up and it's important. And as far as collaborating or with other groups, there are people in those groups that have disabilities. Like, some of them are obvious and some of them are not. But I think what's nice is we do try to be collaborative and we do try to take into account when we're doing things that it's, we have meetings at a place where it's ADA compliant so that people can have access. Our now meetings are someplace where people can get in. It has a ramp so that, if you can't do stairs, everybody can have access to the building. So now typically that is something that most buildings have to have anyway, but you do still find places sometimes that are not as accessible as others. And it's frustrating, or they don't have that much parking. And parking's a huge deal in Morgantown half the time. So, or there's like one handicap spot and that's it. So.
I'm just curious if you have heard of the disability rights lawyer Haben Girma. Are you familiar with Haben?
I don't think I am.
I'm just curious because I've been listening to Haben Girma's book. Haben Girma is actually a deafblind Eritrean American who graduated from Harvard Law School. And I'm really curious to learn more about the way that she does law and the things that she's doing for accessibility. And I'm just curious if you know anything about, from your perspective in West Virginia, if there are a lot of legal cases that happen on a regular basis with, enforcing the ADA and getting reasonable accommodations for people who dealt with any of that kind of stuff. I'm really curious.
I've not had to deal with a lot of that. I did notice that that in looking at it, there was that one in Kanawha County from 2020 about the students suing about not getting, where they were basically just sending the kids in the special ed classes home instead of giving them any kind of teaching them anything or trying to teach them anything, really. And that was moving forward. But I haven't really seen a whole lot on that. I do like the disability rights, the West Virginia Disability Rights Group's priorities that they listed for different things that they wanted to see happen. They have a list of priorities on their website for 2023 and different things that they would like to see happen.
Yeah.
And their number one is children and youth with disabilities receive an appropriate education. So I know that is a big one, and just to make sure that we're not just putting children that have a disability of some kind in the classroom and just kind of ignoring them or letting them mark time, instead of actually ensuring that they're learning something while they're going to school. So.
Well, one thing that's of importance to me is that, for example, going back to 1990, the very year that the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, I was given, a plane ticket and I bring this up because that was when I found out about the Disability Pride March in 1990. It was in Boston. It was the first time I ever marched in a disability pride march, and found out that it was, inspired by the LGBT pride marches. Well, first I had a plane ticket sent to me. Not, it wasn't just a march in that alone necessarily. It was, to go down there to honor Audre Lorde, the black lesbian feminist who, tragically died from breast cancer. And so I took some time out from that recognition to go march in that, and it felt so damn good. My brain, was suddenly going through that whirlwind of all the hell that I had been through in my life, from being in, the segregation of special ed classes to being 1 month in a hellhole of a so-called state hospital to being sat on, literally, physically by a psychiatrist who thankfully had his, license, yanked before he died, to having another so-called therapist sit on me and various members of my family, and all all kinds of other crap and things that still affect me, that have caused me to have, depression and anxiety, and not, be able to, quote, keep a job like every other so-called normal person, to this day. And so, but the march made me feel, wonderful. And they have marches like this in Chicago, and this will be their 20th. And Matt and I went last year, and I have heard that in Philly they have them. I don't know how many more they have around the world, and I'm angry that there aren't enough of them. And I'm like, well, we need more of that, because, it's an identity, like being Jewish or being a humanist. And now that I'm, in that, now that I'm 61 and about to be 62, I always forget to add that as well. And so, disability is nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm tired of this crap that, that it's abnormal. It is not.
Yeah, it's
at all whatsoever.
It's a part of life, and people deserve to be proud of themselves regardless,
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting coverage for parades and marches can be a little more difficult, or at least, like, I don't know. I mean, I showed up for the Pride March this year, and I had gone last year, actually, and it was very well attended last year. There were a lot of people.
Oh, good.
And, there were a ton of people participating, and they applied for the permit. There were quite a few people who showed up to do it this year, even though it had been canceled, and they were just doing the walk. Quite a few people still came out to do the walk, and they were very disappointed. And the organizers, I talked to a couple of them, and, they seemed very suspicious about, why the cops had canceled it so last minute, because I got to tell you, I agree with them to some degree. Morgantown as a town has a ton of parades. I mean, far more than any other place I have ever lived. They're always down here for some kind of march or parade of some kind. And I mean, it's ridiculous how often they shut it down for something, a street fair, a parade, whatever. It drives me nuts to shut down half the downtown section, or all of it almost, for some march, parade, or street festival or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's also kind of nice, because you do all kinds of different things. International Street Festival, that's kind of cool. Arts Festival, they shut down part of the street for that. So, why did they cancel the Pride Parade, though? Last minute, too, like 2 days before this thing that had been planned for months, they shut it down. Now they're rescheduling it. They're going to do it again, try it again, like when the students are back in town this fall, even though it's not Pride Month. So they've applied, I guess, for a new permit. I haven't heard the exact date, but they're going to do it. But it just seems suspicious. And the other thing is nobody came out to. I don't know. It would be nice to see more disability marches. I don't know how much coverage it would get in West Virginia. I do know that when we've tried to do marches and walks, and even when we do protests on the courthouse lawn and different things like that, and we get permits, getting news coverage doesn't always happen. I mean,
yeah, I believe it.
That we try to notify sometimes. We tell people we're going to do it. We even get sometimes enough to fill up the whole little area in front of the courthouse and various other places that we do these things. But, actually getting the mayor to show up doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does. Right now we have the mayor. She's actually shown up to some stuff, but it depends on who, who's on city council and who is the mayor. But getting a news station to show up doesn't always happen to really get noticed. So, it's the same progressive people, like although most of the people there, or at least a decent portion of a lot of the people there, and they bring some friends that I might not know, but it's
Well,
nice. But
that's why it's so important for groups like ours and shows like ours to exist, so that even outside of whatever's going on in one individual town or whatnot, we can still keep these conversations
a while.
Oh, okay. Great.
Last few.
And
Okay.
I feel like the more we can make all of our festivals and all of our events as accessible as possible, then everybody can participate anyway. And that's kind of like what you said about your now meeting and a lot of those things too, is like, make sure that people are included. I think that's really important in the first place, is just like, are we prioritizing access? Can people show up?
We should be.
If they want to, that's one of the
Absolutely.
The group I mentioned, the Community Coalition for Social Justice, is spearheading they're doing environmental justice fair is what they're calling it, and they're inviting a lot of the same groups to come out and do something this September. So that'll be, there's supposed to be live music and various things going on. And that, I think, in September or something. So I know a couple of groups that I'm in are supposed to be taking part in that. And then I think the NAACP has something planned for late August. That's something targeting the African American community specifically, but also looking at people who have just moved to Morgantown. They're trying to also target people who like new professors, new faculty, new staff, those kinds of people. The new people who are new to Morgantown, especially, and also anyone of color, but just. But so they've got something planned in late August, some kind of festival some kind of fair type thing, I think, that they're doing. I don't know all the details on that. So we've got different groups doing a lot of different things, and then trying to be as open and intersectional and inclusive as they can in terms of welcoming people to the community. How do we help? How do we do this? Here's what we've got in town, kind of thing. Or at least that's sort of told me about, like, here's all these groups that we have. There's, because West Virginia is not necessarily a hugely diverse state. I mean, we do have people of color in West Virginia. It's not like huge contingent, but it is more diverse in Morgantown at least. So you'll find quite a few different countries represented here, in large part because of the university. So you get more of a multicultural environment here. And it's kind of, I like that actually. And you get more variety in your restaurants here as well, although there's still a few things. So I do miss that. When I lived in Frederick, Maryland, for a few more options restaurants that they had that we don't have here yet. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Amanda, what is your advice to people, especially, people who might not be the first person that someone would picture when they think of a lawyer, as a woman who's a lawyer, as someone who might have a disability that's interested in being a lawyer, or someone who's queer who's interested in being a lawyer? What is your advice to people who would like to become lawyers?
We need lawyers who don't look like or think like or act like traditional lawyers.
Yep.
One of the things, it's actually interesting, but when I was applying to law school, and I got a master's first, like, I was West Virginia born and raised, grew up on a little farm just north of West Virginia, which is our state capital. But, I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere, kind of, 17 miles from the nearest town. Raising cattle as a kid, like, it was very country lifestyle. My parents didn't go to college. It was, no one knew really had gone to college. Everybody, if they graduated high school, some people hadn't graduated high school. The big thing was graduate high school. Here I went to high school, I graduated college, got a master's degree, law school or a PhD, but when I was applying, one of the women on my thesis committee, I was doing something about women's legal rights in West Virginia was my thesis. And one of my advisors was Joyce McConnell, who later went on to become dean of the law school here in Morgantown and then president of a college out in Colorado for a while. But she had looked at me and was like, we need people who think like you, Amanda, in school. We need young feminists. We need progressive women, to go to law school. Because if you don't, then we get the same kind of laws. We get the same kind of thinking. So, it's nice to have someone who has a different opinion, who looks at things differently, who says, where are the African Americans? Where are the Asian women? Where are the queer people? Where are the, LGBTQ plus questioning people? When you look at, and I still do that, like when you're looking at an ad or something, you see all those pictures. I mean, so many ads for law firms, and all you see are these old white men.
Yeah.
I mean, how many ads you see on TV for law firms, and it's just a bunch of old white men. And occasionally there's a white woman, and every once in a while there's the token African American or one person of color. But like, it's just crazy. Like, where's the people of color? Where's the person who looks a little bit different? And you don't see them. And it's almost like they keep us out. But, we need to stop that. And it's also be intimidating, but it's not outrageous. And if we're going to make changes, we got to know the law.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, Alice Paul went to law school. she got a doctorate in the law too, actually.
Oh,
And led the right to vote, and she's one of the leaders in getting us the right to vote. And then she was also around for some of the Civil Rights Act, died in 1977. But I mean, she knew the importance of changing the law. Women getting the right to vote, but also changing the law so that women had rights. And that's really what you got to do for any group that you're talking about, whether you're talking about women or gays or transgender people or people with disabilities. If you don't change the law, then you're going to have discrimination. And actually, even with the change, that discrimination, but that's because that's what people do.
Yeah, you have to
but at
change
least
the law
the
and
law
enforce the law. Yeah.
Yeah, if the law is there, then you can hold them accountable for the fact that they're being discriminatory.
Yeah.
exactly.
So go to law
I
school.
love that answer. Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, raising the bar, right, Amanda? Raising the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Literally.
Yeah, raise the bar and use it against them.
Yep, there you go.
Definitely.
We've got to
Yeah,
remember
I once
what helps us.
wanted to go to law school, but I just, have such a terrible time with logic, and I had talked to my wealthy uncle when he was still alive, and I mean, he was wealthy. He, worked in just the opposite of, progressive politics, before he passed on. And I mean, he didn't talk me out of it because he only talked me out of it because of my lack of experience. Well, not because of my lack of experience, but because of my not being good in the logic area. I wanted to do it for social justice reasons, and I even used to live so damn close by to, what was then known as Hamlin Mitchell Law. Well, I used to live by what was known as William Mitchell Law School. Now it's known as Hamlin Mitchell Law School on Holly Avenue. I used to rent from, an older black elderly male, and he rescued me from a not so wonderful landlord, an Alcoholics Anonymous buddy of his got me out of a place where the landlord was having a problem with his drinking. This one, the one other person I just described was a recovering alcoholic, non-macho. He was a cat lover, and I miss him, and I cry for him a lot. And I cried for him even more lately when I was dealing with a, terrible, terrible landlord public housing deal. And I'm glad, of where I'm at now, and I still cry for him. Sometimes I even cry for the kitty who he called Lucky. He just miss that cat too.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just, but I mean, I'm a good fighter, but I'm not sure I would be a very good lawyer.
It kind of depends on what you're doing, though. I mean, just because you go
I guess it depends, yeah.
In and
I mean,
court.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of things you can use the law for. I mean, some people.
That's very true.
Like, I go to court a lot. For example, I mean, I have court every day this week. One hearing every day this week and out of court. But I dated one guy, and he never went to court, went to law school, never intending to go to court. That's not his thing.
Wow.
He did contract work, reviewing contracts. So, like, he sits in his office all day reading documents and reviewing them and checking them over at multi-million-dollar contracts and documents. I mean, it's an important work, typos are important. Like, every word choice matters, and every counts. But I mean, that's what he did all day. I have other friends who work small, and they do document review and record searches in the courthouses and things, and just title searches and different other things. I mean, and then you've got people who work in advocacy agencies. So, I interviewed to do things like, the National Coalition Against Homelessness. I thought that would be a neat thing to do when I was younger. To write policy and work on advocacy, just because, you know the law and you want to work on something and write policy about certain issues, and maybe write the law to try to deal with the issue of homelessness and various other issues. And, I think I tried to interview for Planned Parenthood at one point, or I applied to do something for there. And I mean, just applying for different organizations that you think you might like to work for, or even just writing stuff for your own state legislatures or reviewing stuff. I mean, it helps to know how to write the law, but also why the wording matters. So,
right.
It comes in
handy.
I mean,
I love Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. Well, love them or hate them. I mean, we owe them a lot, technically, because, birth control, a lot of freedoms come out of Planned Parenthood and work that she did and Planned Parenthood did in terms of just everything. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We would be here today without them, really.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Amanda, if you don't have a joke, I have a joke for us today.
I definitely don't have a joke. I mean, that is, if you're talking about, that is an area I'm so good at. And even if I had one, I end up screwing it up. So, yeah, I get timing wrong. I'd tell you the wrong part.
It's not a legal joke, but it does have something to do with the radio station we've been broadcasting on, because it is a frog joke, and we're on Frogtown. So the joke is, what happens when frogs park illegally? Any guesses? They get towed.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can share that one in the courtroom tomorrow.
Probably not, but it's not usually time to double check. And I'm not sure why it come up, but
well, Beth, do you have any other questions before we wrap up for the night?
I'm trying to think of some others. Well, is Morgantown the biggest town in West Virginia in terms of being progressive?
it's possible. It probably is the most progressive in West Virginia. We tend to be the blue dot in the red state.
Okay.
So, I mean, we have been a red state for a while now, unfortunately. And if you look at us, we've been a very red state. But Morgantown itself is a blue dot.
Oh, okay.
Our local delegates are Democratic and blue, and we even have at least three. Well, we have at least three city council members that were pretty good, and our mayor is that currently, if I'm recalling correctly. Yes, Yes, same there. I don't think that's changed yet. At the moment, it's been fairly nice. I've talked to her a few times. And she's come to some of our now related stuff. So that's why I say, she's actually attended a few things. And she went down and spoke on behalf of, there was some, I'm trying to think now. I think it was on some of the pride and transgender issues. She and at least one or two of the city council members went down and spoke, if I'm not mistaken, at our state legislature, which is almost unheard of. But quite a few, and I will preface this by saying anyone from Morgantown has to drive 2.5 hours to get to Charleston to speak, and you had to be there by 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh wow!
So it's a 2.5 hour drive, and you had to be there by 8 o'clock in the morning. And I think you actually had to send them a thing the night before to get on the list. So a last minute notice as well. So you had to be paying attention, get on the list, get up extra early, drive down on a weekday to get 2 minutes to talk.
Wow.
And they cut it off like 50 people. But there were quite a few people from Morgantown who drove down a couple different times to speak on various progressive issues. And I do believe that we did have a few members, which did include the mayor, on at least one issue that went down and spoke. And from, abortion to transgender rights. And I think that one was the transgender children being able to play sports.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Bill about that. And then there was some stuff that some other LGBTQ issues that they were doing some horrible stuff on, and trying to get the Crown Act passed. It passed here in Morgantown as a city ordinance, and we've got about 5 cities in the state that have it. The Crown Act saying natural hair is an okay thing and a beautiful thing, and you should be able to have your hair and wear it however you want it. We're kind of state level, hasn't quite passed. But there are like 5 have it. Morgantown's one of them. I think Beckley, Huntington, Charleston maybe is one of the others. So we've got several that have passed it on an individual basis, but just like Morgantown, if I'm not mistaken, we pretty much have passed almost all the non-discrimination. You can't discriminate on the basis of against transgenders and on the basis of just all kinds of stuff. We have a lot of that in our stuff here in the city, and I think they've even passed or at least the city of Morgantown may have even passed the whole thing about marijuana not being a big deal, not to ticket people for a joint, but that hasn't passed. It's medical marijuana is okay in West Virginia, recreational is not, for any reason. Although I don't think you're supposed to get a ticket in the city of Morgantown now. You'll still get one.
Oh, for marijuana smoking?
Yeah, well, I think if it's just your personal use or something, I forget exactly. They were trying to get that passed. I think it might have gotten passed I don't think I've gotten any clients lately that have gotten in trouble for anything like a possession of that. I used to get occasionally, and that would be one of the things they'd be charged with, and usually with something else trumped up in there, but I haven't seen a ticket on that in quite a while. Or a write-up on something like that. So I'm thinking it did pass, in the city at least. They quit. I mean, I don't think it was a major penalty unless you had a bunch of them. Like if you were working on your 3rd or 4th or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we in Minnesota in our legislature finally passed recreational, we got it legalized recreationally. Yeah, powers that be finally decided that it did no good to have it illegal anymore.
Yeah, well,
Much like with booze.
we have a 75% Republican, I think, super majority right now, and they've kind of been doing a major conservative back time thing. So they actually released some kind of memo basically saying a woman's place was in the home and the most important thing she could do was have children, blah, blah, blah. It was even kind of educational because it really said that, you know, the priority should be more on getting married and having children, on an education, etc., and that people that discouraged getting married and having children and encouraged getting an education first were sort of bad. I don't know. It was really ridiculous and kind of revolting. Actually, it was a memorandum type thing out of the legislature last session. So I'm not really looking forward to what else they're going to pass this time, based on their little memo, how they're viewing women lately. Oh, and it also stated very clearly that they think women are women and men are men, of course.
That women and men are what?
Well, women are women and men are men, and there is no ambiguity there. So, yes.
And you should dress a certain way and talk a certain way and do certain things. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all very clear to them.
Gender roles. And
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was, that's what I'm saying. They're not taking into account young people or progressive thoughts for the day or anything like that. And I mean, you know, it's not how most of the country is thinking, really. And I'm not sure we're getting this at all, because, you know, I have yet to meet a parent yet who says, I want my daughter to drop out of school and have babies.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
It's just ridiculous. And especially considering the one and only abortion clinic we had in the state had to close because we can't do them anymore here. And we only had one to begin with. So, you know, and it's now very restrictive here. So technically, if you run into any complications, so for example, someone my age who's in her mid-40s, who might have, you know, what would be considered a geriatric pregnancy, could run into complications and need, you know, to have an abortion or some kind of care like that, could end up dying because I can't get the care I need.
And I will, you know, write, you know, like, you know, when I was at work one day, a tune of Missing You by Dan Fogelberg. I don't know if you had ever heard of him before he passed away. He was wonderful, especially on environmental and Native American issues, and I especially had a crush on him. He, you know, it was Missing You, and I could, you know, decided to write, you know, his tune. Well, I called it, you know, I made up a new tune to going back to the Stone Age. And I made up that tune because once a long time ago, when I was working as a gardener aide, and it was only a temporary job, you know, at Como Park Conservatory, and Como Park Conservatory was union, and I didn't have, you know, the privilege of working in the union. It was only a temp job, unfortunately. You know, and one of the guys was, you know, Christian and quote unquote Christian in his, you know, and this was during the Reagan Revolution, and he had this stupid sticker on the back of his car that said Reagan bringing America back, and I crack up at it now, but a friend of mine said, yeah, bringing us back to the Stone Age. And I, you know, and that's how I got, you know, came up with the idea of the tune, you know, sung to Dan Fogelberg's Missing You. And I, you know, thought, yeah, it's, you know, No going back to the stone age. And if, there were more progressive uh, uh, politicians.
I don't have a joke, but you mentioned like hopes and dreams for the future. As an attorney, I do have one thing I would say. I would hope that we start taking people seriously in terms of disability rights, women,
Oh, yeah.
anything that comes forward, because I think what often happens is we don't take people as they are, and we try to the police, the system, we try to treat people that it's like they see people and they don't really see people. They're just like, you should be this way, and you're not behaving the way I want you to behave, and therefore wrong, and you're not behaving normally, and I'm going to arrest you, or I'm going to charge you with this. And you need to stop doing what you're doing and be the way I want you to be. And I hate that, because they shouldn't. You should be able to be who you want to be, do what you want to do, live where you want to live, and we should make that accessible and make it so that people can do that and not get punished for it. And we should train police officers and individuals, and honestly, we should teach our kids that you shouldn't make people feel bad or lesser because they have a disability, or because they look a certain way or act a certain way, or to treat someone badly because they may look different or behave differently. So that would be my hope, is that we do better about how we treat people, how we teach people, act around people, and then also that people are free to be who they are, because we've done a better job of being better people ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I come up against that so much with my disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just really hard, and it just makes it even harder, because I see it so much sometimes that, people would not get shot, people would not get hurt, some people would not get arrested. People had just stopped and paid attention and said, okay, this person needs help, or this person needs this, or that looks or not this, or, or the story, like I mentioned before we were quite on the air, of like my client who very clearly was telling the officer that he was depressed and he wanted to kill himself, and they took him to the hospital to get evaluated, but then they decided that they were in the waiting room too long, and they'd rather just take him to the jail so they could log off and go. So like he should have seen a psychiatrist and gotten evaluated and gotten the mental health, the help that he needed, not So it's ridiculous that people just don't do the things that they need to do or that they should do.
Yeah.
I doubt anything happened to those officers for not doing what they should have done, very clearly. I mean, that one was a really clear case. I mean, the guy is on video saying things, so there's no ambiguity whatsoever on that one.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for raising the bar. This has been a really wonderful. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I still don't feel like I really qualify quite, because I know disability rights all the time. It touches on several of my cases, but not all of them. And but I appreciate the time, and I hope I answered your questions well.
You did. You definitely did.
Yeah, you did.
Let's definitely.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
You too.
Me too.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night now.